In 1956, a woman named Ruth slept in a shotgun house in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, with 4 children in the next room. An 8-pound cast-iron skillet rested on the chair beside her bed. By sunrise, that skillet would be full of cornbread. But at 2 in the morning, it had a different job. Her husband worked nights at the rail yard. The nearest neighbor was 2 houses down. The police were not people she called unless there was no other choice. Number 23 was sharp enough to puncture leather and respectable enough to wear to church. Number 17 sat on the stove every Saturday morning, and every child knew not to touch it. Number 9 was hidden inside a book nobody in that house opened without permission. And number 1 was so ordinary most people never realized it was the whole system. Hit that subscribe button, because what you are about to hear is not a weapons video. It is the story of how black grandmothers kept houses safe with objects nobody could ever call a weapon. Here are the 25. We are starting with the one that lived beside the bed and fed the family in the morning. It was never just a skillet. Number 25, the cast-iron skillet by the bed. A 12-inch Griswold skillet weighed close to 8 pounds in 1956 and cost about $3 new at the hardware store. The most ubiquitous self-defense object in black Southern history was the same one that made breakfast. Ruth sat on a wooden chair beside her bed every night her husband worked the rail yard. The handle was smooth from 20 years of biscuits, cornbread, and pork chops. But here is what made it untouchable. A white woman with a cast-iron skillet on her bedside chair was a woman who liked her kitchen close. A black woman with the same skillet was carrying the most reliable weapon in the house, and the only one no officer could ever name. Ruth's granddaughter still cooks in it. The handle still fits a hand that knows what it is for. Number 24, the ice pick in the kitchen drawer. 6 inches of carbon steel on a wooden handle. In 1948, you bought one at any hardware store for 15 cents. Every kitchen with an icebox had one in the drawer beside the bottle opener. A grandmother in Macon, Georgia, kept hers in the same drawer for 31 years. Then the icebox disappeared. By the late 1960s, an ice pick in a kitchen drawer no longer had a cover story. A white woman with one was a woman who kept old things. A black woman with one was a question waiting to be asked. The grandmother in Macon kept hers anyway. Her son remembered the drawer because it stuck in the summer. His mother knew the exact pull. If you ever opened a drawer your grandma told you to leave alone, number 23 is the one she was protecting. Number 23, the hat pin in the church hat box. A church hat pin in 1958 was 12 inches of steel and cost about 20 cents at the dry goods counter. The most fashionable concealed weapon in America was sitting inside every black grandmother's hat box. In Montgomery, Alabama, a grandmother named Cora wrapped hers in tissue paper. On Sunday, they held the crown of her hat in place. On the walk home, they did something else. By 1910, northern cities had already passed laws limiting hat pin length after women used them in self-defense. The laws followed the panic, not the danger. Black church women in the Deep South kept theirs long. Cora's granddaughter still has one in a jewelry box, too long for any modern hat she owns. Number 22, the sewing shears nobody touched. Heavy steel sewing shears cost about $1.20 at the Sears catalog in 1952 and lasted 3 generations. The most respected sharp object in any black home was the one children learned never to touch. In Clarksdale, Mississippi, a woman named Mabel kept hers wrapped in a flour sack in the top drawer of her sewing table. The blades opened with a thick metal sound that made any child step back. But a knife law was a knife law. A pair of shears in a drawer was a sewing tool, protected by its location. Move them to a coat pocket, and the law had a different name for them. Mabel never moved hers. When she said, "Do not touch my scissors," nobody needed the sentence repeated. Number 21, The straight razor in the medicine cabinet. A Sheffield steel straight razor cost $1.50 in 1950 and stayed sharp for 40 years. The most common shaving tool in America was also the most common weapon nobody could ever search a house for. A woman in Meridian, Mississippi, kept one in the medicine cabinet after her husband started working night shifts. She used it for trimming thread, cutting cloth, opening packages. Then, disposable blades came in. A bathroom razor in 1965 was modern, but a straight razor folded into a leather case had become something else entirely. The object stayed the same, but the cover story changed. After her funeral, her daughter found it wrapped in a handkerchief beside a tin of hairpins, still sharp. And the one the church mothers carried is coming up at number 14. You already know what it is. Number 20. The broom handle behind the kitchen door. A broom in 1953 cost about 40 cents at the corner store. The handle was 30 inches of hard maple or hickory. In a shotgun house in Jackson, Mississippi, a grandmother named Lucille kept a broom behind the kitchen door, bristles down, handle up, always in the same corner. But the broom was the legal loophole that survived everything. No state ever banned one, and no officer ever asked a black woman why she owned one. The corner where Lucille kept hers was 2 steps from the stove and 3 steps from the back door. She replaced the straw head 3 times over the years. She never replaced the handle. Number 19. The rolling pin on the flower table. A solid maple rolling pin weighed 3 pounds and cost 70 cents at the general store. In Savannah, Georgia, a grandmother named Edna kept hers on the flower table beside the lard tin. She made biscuits every morning with the same pressure, palms flat and wrists strong. And the rolling pin belonged in the kitchen so completely that nobody looked at it twice. But it was hard maple, smooth at the handles, and close enough to grab before a person crossed the room. A rolling pin in a kitchen was breakfast, while a rolling pin in a hand was reach. The kitchen was the one room in any house the law was reluctant to search without a name to say. When Edna died, her daughter kept the rolling pin even though she bought canned biscuits. Some objects still feel like protection after the work is gone. Number 18. The butcher knife under the dish towel. Every kitchen had one serious knife, 8 inches of carbon steel with a wooden handle darkened by water. In Natchez, Mississippi, a grandmother named Josephine kept hers under a folded dish towel beside the sink when she was home alone. Every knife law in America had an exception for kitchen use, which made the butcher knife the protected weapon. A blade in a coat pocket was a charge, but the same blade beside the sink, wrapped in cotton, was dinner. The handle was darkened by years of hands. She never left it out where children could reach it. Number 17. The hot comb on the stove. A hot comb cost about 90 cents in 1955 and sat on the back of the stove every Saturday morning. The most untraceable weapon in any black home in America was heat. In Birmingham, Alabama, a grandmother named Alberta could test the comb against a piece of paper and read the temperature from the way the air moved. There was no serial number, no registration, no store record. The stove was sovereign, and nothing inside a black kitchen lived under a law that could find it. Alberta kept the comb on the back of the stove long after the last head was finished. Children feared it because they knew what heat could do. Number 16. The red pepper tin. Crushed red pepper sold for 15 cents a tin at the corner grocery and sat near every stove in the Black South. In Lafayette, Louisiana, a woman named Bernice kept hers in a small tin beside the salt. She used it for beans, greens, and anything that needed waking up. But a handful of red pepper in the wrong moment bought a woman 3 seconds. 3 seconds was the difference between a stranger crossing the kitchen and a stranger leaving the porch. The law could not arrest a woman for owning seasoning. Bernice called it her pantry. Her grandson remembered the tin because it made him sneeze before she even opened it. If you grew up being told not to touch Grandma's things, this is why. In her house, every object had a reason. The chair by the bed, the drawer, the hat box, the stove. A black grandmother did not need to explain every object in her house because the house was already speaking to her. She knew which floorboard creaked, which window stuck, which child woke easily, and which neighbor would come if the porch light flashed twice. What looked like strictness was often protection with an apron on. If you want to carry your grandmother's knowledge forward, the link is in the description. Number 15. The lye soap wrapped in a washcloth. Homemade lye soap was hard as a brick and cured for 6 weeks before use. In rural Alabama, a grandmother named Pearl kept a bar wrapped in a washcloth near the back door. The cloth made it look like cleaning, but a bar of lye soap in a wet washcloth was a slungshot with a different name. Slungshots had been banned in most states since the 1840s. Lye soap had not. The law had no language for it. Pearl used the soap because it worked. The wrapped bar stayed by the door until the last child moved out. Then it stayed there because habit had become part of the house. Number 14. The church purse with a heavy coin pouch. A black leather pocketbook cost about $4 at Belk's in 1955. The most respectable weapon a black woman ever carried to church was the bag she set beside the pew. In Atlanta, Georgia, a grandmother named Louise carried hers with a silver coin pouch sewn into the lining. Keys added more weight. A purse was respectability. A purse with 8 ounces of metal at the bottom was something else. Nobody ever wrote a vagrancy ticket for a woman carrying her own pocketbook. Louise's daughter said her mother never swung it in anger. She did not have to. Everybody on the block knew that purse was heavier than it looked. Number 13. The house keys between her fingers. Old house keys in 1950 were iron, brass, 4 inches long, and weighed almost an ounce each. A grandmother in Charleston carried 7 keys on a ring large enough to fill her palm. The most quietly effective knuckle duster ever invented was the thing women already had in their hand walking home from the streetcar. A purse snatcher with a fist between his eyes did not need to know the metal was a key. The ring sounded like a warning when it moved. Her grandson once asked why she carried so many keys. She said, "Because I got too much to lock up." If you ever watched your grandma walk home from church with her keys already in her hand, number 12 is going to make sense. Number 12. The umbrella by the front door. A wooden-handled church umbrella cost $1.50 in 1954. The metal tip was sharp enough to test puddles. The shaft was strong enough to lean on in bad weather. In Memphis, Tennessee, a grandmother named Vera kept hers in the stand by the front door whether it rained or not. Nobody ever questioned a black woman with an umbrella in her hand. The umbrella was the perfect concealment because the object was not concealed, it was carried openly, used openly, and named openly. At night, it gave her reach. The black fabric faded to gray over the years, but the metal tip stayed bright. Number 11. The fireplace poker beside the stove. An iron poker was 19 inches of forged steel and lived next to every wood stove in America. In Greensboro, North Carolina, a grandmother named Hattie kept hers beside the stove long after the family started using gas. Houses with gas heat had no reason for a poker. A poker beside a gas stove had no cover story. But the law had no language for an object that used to belong. Hattie said the old stove still needed tending, and maybe it did. Or maybe she liked having iron close to the kitchen door. Children were told not to play with it because fire tools were not toys, and she never raised her voice when she said it. Number 10. The cane beside the bed. A hickory cane cost about $2.75 at the dry goods store and was sold to any older woman who walked in. In Selma, Alabama, A grandmother named Mattie kept hers against the bed frame. She used it when her knees hurt, which was often enough that no one questioned it. But a cane was infirmity, and infirmity was a camouflage. People stepped aside for an old woman with a cane. They did not search her. Mattie's granddaughter said the cane had a sound of its own. 1 tap meant, "Come here." 2 taps meant, "Hurry." 3 meant, "Do not ask questions." Number 9. The Bible with something hidden inside. A family Bible could sit on a table for 20 years without a stranger opening it. That made it one of the safest places in the house. In Tuskegee, Alabama, a grandmother named Evelyn kept hers on the table beside her bed. Inside were pressed funeral programs, birth dates, a folded dollar, and one page that sat thicker than the rest. A Bible was the one object officers would not search. Faith was the legal loophole. Whatever was inside that book was protected by what was printed on the cover. Her children were told never to open that Bible unless she was in the room. If the first half of this list was about ordinary objects, the next half is about placement. Grandma's house worked because everything lived where her hand expected it to be. She did not have to search. She did not have to think. She already knew the distance from the bed to the chair, from the stove to the drawer, from the table to the back door. That was not fear. That was order. In a world that did not always protect black women, order was a kind of strength. Number 8. The boiling water pot. A heavy enamel pot cost $2 at the Woolworths in 1953. The most offended room in a black grandmother's house was the kitchen, and the reason was on the back of the stove. In New Orleans, Louisiana, a grandmother named Ida kept a pot of hot water there most evenings. No state ever banned a stove. No officer ever wrote a charge for a pot. Heat had no serial number, no permit, and no paper trail. Ida used it for daily life. She also knew that hot water could change a room before anybody crossed it. The pot was white with blue chips along the rim. Number 7. The loose floorboard hiding place. Pine flooring in 1948 cost about 15 cents a board and lifted with a thin knife if you knew which one. In Greenwood, Mississippi, a widow named Sarah had a loose board beneath the rug near her bed. Under it were papers, cash, and one wrapped object her children never saw. The floor itself was the protection. An officer in a black home in 1950 searched what was visible. He rarely searched what he had to lift. The architecture was part of how she kept it. Years later, her son lifted that board and found the hiding place empty. The shape of it was still there in the dust. If you ever heard a grandmother say her house had a memory, number 6 is the moment she was talking about. Number 6. The shotgun behind the wardrobe. An old single-shot shotgun cost $12 at the pawn shop in 1952. In rural Mississippi, a grandmother outside Greenwood kept one wrapped in cloth behind the wardrobe. A registered shotgun in a southern black home in the 1950s was protection. An unregistered one was a felony. The wardrobe was the difference. She did not display it or talk about it. It was not for pride, but for the kind of knock that came too late and too hard. Her oldest daughter said she saw it only once, after dogs started barking at midnight, and by morning it was gone again. Number 5. The small pistol in the Bible box. A small pistol could cost $6 used at a pawn counter in 1949. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a woman named Alma kept one wrapped in a handkerchief at the bottom of a wooden Bible box beside her bed. A pistol in a drawer was a gun. A pistol inside a Bible box was invisible to any officer who would not open a stranger's Bible. Faith and steel in one container, hidden by the cover of one and held by the weight of the other. She never called it a gun. She called it that little thing. Everyone in the house knew what tone of voice she meant. Number 4. The kitchen drawer nobody touched. Every family had one drawer children were warned away from. In a black grandmother's house, that drawer could hold matches, scissors, an ice pick, a small knife, loose coins, and folded papers with names written on them. In Jackson, Mississippi, a grandmother named Naomi had one beside the sink that stuck unless you lifted it slightly. But the drawer itself was not the weapon. The strategy was, a drawer was furniture, but a whole organized corner of a house with rules attached was something else entirely. When Naomi died, her grandchildren cleaned the kitchen and found everything in its place, exactly where her hand had left it. The final two are not about what she kept. They are about how she turned a house into a defense system the law could not see. Number 3. The church hat box. The hat box held the Sunday hat, the gloves, the pins, and the folded veil. It also held the little purse and sometimes the things a woman carried only when she had to leave her own porch. In Birmingham, Alabama, a grandmother named Alberta kept hers on the top shelf of the wardrobe. But the hat box was the bridge. Inside the house, the objects were household. Crossing the porch on Sunday morning, the same objects became armor. The box was where private and public met. When Alberta closed the lid, she was not just getting ready for church. She was preparing to travel through a world that watched black women too closely and protected them too little. Number 2. The house itself. A shotgun house was narrow enough that one woman could hear almost everything from the front porch to the back door. She could even hear the window that rattled when the wind came from the east. A grandmother in Little Rock knew her house better than any map. She knew which board creaked, which chair blocked the door best, which neighbor could hear her if she called, and which light to turn on when something was wrong. The house was not passive. It was part of her. A grandmother who knew her house this well had built a defense system the law could not search, because the law did not know it existed. People thought Grandma kept a clean house because she was strict. She kept it clean because order gave her time. Number 1. The housecoat pocket. At the top of this list is the most ordinary thing of all. The pocket sewn into the front of a black grandmother's housecoat. It held peppermints, keys, folded money, safety pins, a handkerchief, a note with phone numbers, maybe a small pair of scissors, maybe something nobody asked about. The housecoat pocket was not a holster. It was not a purse. It was closer than both. A grandmother could cook in it, answer the door in it, walk to the mailbox in it. She could sit beside the bed in it. She kept what she needed against her body all day long. In Pine Bluff, Ruth wore a faded blue housecoat with one deep pocket on the right side. Her children thought it held candy. Sometimes it did. Her oldest daughter said that pocket was like the whole house in miniature, soft on the outside, organized on the inside, ready without looking ready. That was the secret. Black grandmothers did not need the house to look armed. They needed it to work. The housecoat pocket was the proof. Here is the challenge. Ask the oldest person you know about the oldest woman they remember. Ask what stayed beside the bed. Ask what was in the kitchen drawer nobody touched. Ask what was in the church purse, the hat box, the Bible box, or the housecoat pocket. Drop a name in the comments. The person, the place, the year if you know it. These women were not looking for trouble. They were making sure trouble did not get the final word. These were not just weapons, they were wisdom. And the women who kept them close were the reason so many families slept through nights they never knew were dangerous.